Underscore, imagine hiking up a quiet Brazilian hill, only to discover two lifeless men lying side by side, dressed in formal suits, raincoats buttoned up, and over their eyes strange lead masks. There's no sign of a struggle, no wounds, just a cryptic note, and a mystery that still haunts Brazil to this day. Welcome back to the Timeless File, where we dive into the strangest unsolved cases from history, one file at a time. Today's story isn't just eerie, it borders on otherworldly. Was it a bizarre spiritual ritual, a failed scientific experiment, or something far more unexplainable? This is the Lead Masks case, a true mystery involving death, symbols, and possibly contact with the unknown. The discovery on Vintim Hill. It was August 20th, 1966, when a young boy hunting kites stumbled across something strange on Vintim Hill, just outside Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. The hill, covered in dense vegetation and often cloaked in fog, was no stranger to secrets. But what he found that day would stun even the most seasoned investigators. There, lying side by side on a grassy slope, were two men. Lifeless. Still, they were dressed in matching formal suits, covered by raincoats despite the dry weather. Over their eyes, metal masks made of thick lead, the kind used to protect against radiation. No blood, no bruises, no signs of violence. Police were quickly called in. When they arrived at the scene, more oddities emerged. Beside the bodies were an empty water bottle, a pack of wet towels, a notebook, and most puzzling of all, a handwritten note scribbled in Portuguese. It read, 1630, be at the determined place. 1830, ingest capsules. After the effect protect metals, await signal mask. What did that mean? Had the men taken drugs? Were they awaiting some kind of signal? Why the masks? And how did they die with no trace of trauma? Who were these men? The bodies were eventually identified as Manuel Pereira da Cruz, age 32, Miguel Jose Viana, age 34. Both were electronics technicians from Campos dos Goitacazes, a city 200 kilometers away. They were friends, co-workers, and described as intelligent, serious men. They had traveled together just days before the discovery, telling family they were on a business trip to buy supplies for work. They took a bus, bought waterproof coats, even stopped to buy a bottle of water, and then they vanished. No one knew why they had traveled to Vintim Hill. They had no known contacts there, no clear reason to be in the area, let alone die on that remote slope. The autopsy, or lack of one. What made this case even more mysterious was the lack of a proper autopsy. The coroner at the time delayed the examination due to a backlog, and by the time he began, the bodies had severely decomposed. The result? Cause of death? Undetermined. There were no visible injuries, no poisons identified, no heart attack, nothing definitive. The internal organs were too degraded to analyze. All the authorities could say was that they likely died within hours of each other, and very shortly after arriving on the hill. Clues in the notebook. The note found on them wasn't the only writing. In the notebook were schematics, electrical component lists, technical diagrams, and what appeared to be instructions written cryptically, as if they were preparing for something secret. One page seemed to detail a timed sequence, matching the cryptic capsule plus mask instructions found at the scene. It wasn't gibberish. It had a structure, but it didn't match any known scientific experiment. And if they were testing something, what signal were they waiting for? The woman at the electronics store. A key witness was a shopkeeper who said Miguel had stopped in before leaving Compass. He appeared anxious, in a rush. He bought a lead sheet, saying he needed it for a project. The woman remembered him being nervous and sweating, looking over his shoulder, almost like he knew something wasn't right. Initial theories emerge. At first, the police suspected a failed suicide pact or drug experiment. Perhaps the men had taken LSD or some hallucinogen, hoping to contact a higher plane, but no drug traces were ever found. And why the precise engineering of lead masks? Why the notebook instructions, like a protocol? It didn't look like chaos, it looked deliberate. The puzzle deepens as news of the case spread, so did speculation. People whispered about secret societies, spiritualist cults, and UFO encounters. Others pointed to the men's profession. They were electronics techs. Could they have been experimenting with radio waves, frequency shielding, or something else? To this day, the lead masks remain a haunting image. Two men, lying peacefully, seemingly prepared for something beyond this world. But if they were, what went wrong? Theories and spiritualism, seeking the signal from beyond, as investigators tried to piece together the puzzle of the two dead men with lead masks. The case took a surreal turn, not through forensic evidence, but through the belief systems that may have driven the victims. According to friends and family, Manuel and Miguel were not just electronics technicians. In their spare time, they were deeply interested in spiritualism, paranormal phenomena, and the idea of communicating with higher beings, possibly even extraterrestrial intelligence. They reportedly belonged to a small spiritualist group, somewhat secretive, who believed that intense meditation and certain rituals could open the mind to advanced communication beyond our dimension. One member of this group later told a local paper that Miguel had been preparing for a great revelation. He spoke about receiving energy from space and about a cleansing that would occur during a signal transmission. The chilling part? He mentioned the use of lead masks to shield oneself from intense luminosity. Theory 1. A spiritualist ritual gone wrong. This became the most widely accepted theory in Brazil at the time. The idea is that Miguel and Manuel traveled to Vintim Hill to perform a kind of spiritual experiment, to receive a message or vision from another realm. Perhaps they believed they would see a divine figure, or even an extraterrestrial being, and the lead masks were to protect their eyes from this otherworldly light. The wet towels? Possibly to cool their bodies as they meditated. The water bottle? Used to ingest capsules, which remain unidentified. Did they believe they were being initiated into a higher plane? Or had they been misled, perhaps by someone within the group, into performing something far more dangerous than they understood? There is no record of them ever buying or using hallucinogens, but the capsule instruction raises eyebrows. Theory 2. Alien contact or cosmic transmission. Things got weirder when UFO researchers began to take notice of the case. Multiple UFO sightings had been reported in the area weeks prior. Strange lights in the sky, humming noises at night. Some even claimed that Vintim Hill was a hotspot for aerial phenomena. In the 1960s, the space race and Cold War paranoia fed an obsession with aliens. For men interested in electronics and spiritualism, the intersection between science and cosmic belief was fertile ground. Some theorists argue the men believed they were going to make contact not symbolically, but literally. Did they receive instructions, whether through dreams, rituals, or strange radio signals? The lead masks may not have been metaphorical. They could have expected an actual blinding encounter. And what if they were right? Did they see something? Were they left behind? Theory 3. A deceptive setup. Others argue the men were victims not of the unknown, but of manipulation. There were rumors that a third person was involved, someone from their spiritualist circle who had persuaded them to go to Vintim Hill, armed with instructions, masks, and misplaced trust. Perhaps this person planted the idea of the ritual. Some even believed it was a social experiment gone too far, or a scam promising enlightenment for a price. But no such person was ever found. No group took responsibility. The trail ended with 2 corpses on a hill. Theory 4. Radiation or military exposure. Let's go back to the masks. They were thick and handmade, with welding marks, possibly created in a garage. They resembled the kind of shielding used by technicians handling radioactive material. Did the men expect to encounter radiation? Or did they have knowledge of military experiments nearby? Brazil in the 1960s was experiencing rapid military expansion. Some researchers speculate the hill may have been close to a radio frequency testing zone, or even electromagnetic experiments conducted without civilian awareness. If the men stumbled into such a zone, or were invited into it under false pretenses, the masks could have been a crude form of protection. But then, why would their families know nothing? Why the secrecy? And what about the note? Let's recall the final message they left. 1630, be at the determined place. 1830 in just capsules. After the effect protect metals await signal mask. This is not a suicide note. It's a timeline, a procedure written like a lab experiment or a ritual. Why the exact times? Why the order? And most importantly, what was the signal? Was it spiritual, radio-based, or something not of this earth? No theory explains it all. Each theory has merit, but none explain everything. Why the lead masks, but no radiation detected? Why the secretive behavior, but no clear religious affiliation? Why travel so far? Just to die without resistance, without violence? Even now, decades later, the mystery sits in limbo between science and faith, between logic and fear. What were they trying to protect themselves from? And why did they die waiting for a signal that never came? Or did it come? The investigation and public reaction when police arrived on Victim Hill to examine the scene. The first thing they noticed was the absence of trauma. There were no wounds, no blood, and no signs of struggle. The two men, Manuel Pereira de Cruz and Miguel Jose Viana, lay peacefully, as if they had simply decided to lie down and never got back up. Their watches had stopped. Their lead masks covered their eyes. And yet, the mystery was just beginning. Officers began searching the area more thoroughly. A small, empty water bottle was found near the bodies. Also nearby was a towel, a pack of wet tissues, and a small notebook containing a cryptic note. 1630, be at the determined place. Take capsules after the effect protect metals wait for mask signal. That was it. No explanation, no context. Just a vague sequence that read like a ritual or scientific protocol, or perhaps both. Forensics and frustration. Incredibly, no proper autopsy was carried out for weeks. By the time one was conducted, the bodies had decayed beyond the point of reliable toxicology. It was Brazil, it was summer, and the corpses had been lying on a hillside exposed to heat and insects. This delay created a vacuum, and into that vacuum rushed speculation. The initial investigation focused on the idea that the men may have ingested some form of hallucinogen or poison, possibly thinking they would have an out-of-body experience, or perhaps contact extraterrestrial beings. But with no clear cause of death established, detectives hit a wall. The case was assigned to local authorities, who lacked experience with such bizarre circumstances. At best, they were puzzled. At worst, they dismissed the event as two men getting in over their heads. Still, there were unexplained inconsistencies. The handwriting on the notebook note did not match either of the victims. The seller of the raincoats they wore could not explain why they were so insistent on waterproof gear, despite no forecasted rain. A local waitress claimed she overheard the two talking about a great revelation that would happen that night. But these threads went nowhere. No leads, no suspects, no explanations. The public reacts. As news of the strange death spread, the Brazilian media erupted. Headlines called it a case of the lead masks and painted it as either a case of suicide, cult ritual, or science experiment gone wrong. The lead masks themselves became an object of fascination. Some speculated they were meant to protect the men's eyes from a blinding light, a nuclear flash, a spiritual phenomenon, a spacecraft. UFO enthusiasts were particularly drawn to the case. Brazil had a long history of alleged sightings, and this death occurring during a period of heightened UFO interest fueled the fire. Local tabloids ran with headlines like, "Were they waiting for visitors from the sky?" Soon, the case wasn't just a local oddity, it was a national obsession. Radio shows held late-night debates. Magazines published speculative exposes. Some psychics even claimed to have connected with the spirits of the two men, suggesting they had achieved their goal, but had failed to return to their bodies. The sheer mystery and eeriness of this scene made it irresistible. Missing details and fading interest. Despite the media storm, the case quickly lost momentum within the official system. With no autopsy results, no third-party witnesses, and no clear motive, authorities quietly closed the case. Their final conclusion? Cause of death undetermined. To many, that felt like a convenient way to avoid further embarrassment or responsibility. Meanwhile, families of the victims were left in emotional limbo. Miguel's mother insisted he was not involved in anything criminal or occult, and that something had been done to him. Manuel's relatives were similarly confused and heartbroken. Strangely, no one came forward with solid evidence. The location of the capsules was never determined. If they had taken something, what was it? And if not, then why were they there, in the exact right clothes, at the exact time, with a note indicating they expected a signal? The silence from official channels only deepened the public's fascination. Legacy of a mystery. In the years that followed, the lead masks case became a cultural myth in Brazil. It inspired novels, short films, podcasts, and even songs. But perhaps more importantly, it became a symbol of unsolved truth, the idea that sometimes the world delivers a puzzle with no solution. It represented something more than just two dead men on a hill. It reflected our eternal hunger for answers, our fascination with the unknown, and our fear that we may never know what lies beyond the veil. And so, the file was shelved. But the questions remained. What was the signal? Why the masks? And what, if anything, did they see before the end? Alien connection and conspiracy theories. By the time official investigations fell silent, the case had already taken on a life of its own. And as often happens when answers are absent, the void was filled with theories, some rational, others downright cosmic. The most captivating of these? That Miguel and Manuel were attempting contact, not with spirits, but with extraterrestrial beings. Protect metals. Wait for mask signal. For those deep into UFO subculture, the note found on the scene wasn't cryptic, it was a protocol. Take capsules. Protect metals. Wait for mask signal. To some, this read like an invitation to a higher dimensional experience. The capsules weren't drugs, they were preparatory tools, perhaps biological enhancers to survive a high-frequency encounter. Protect metals? Theories ranged from protecting brain implants to shielding metal objects from interference. And wait for mask signal? Many interpreted this as a reference to communication via blinding light or energy pulse, something beyond human understanding. If this seems far-fetched, consider Brazil in the 1960s was a hotspot for UFO sightings. Reports of strange lights, cigar-shaped crafts, and electromagnetic disturbances were so frequent that even the Brazilian Air Force began quietly collecting data. Some researchers point to an event that occurred just weeks before the lead masks case. A fisherman in the nearby town of Niterói reported being chased by a glowing orb that buzzed like bees and shut off his radio. And what about the masks themselves? They weren't simply sunglasses. They were carefully cut lead visors, designed to cover the eyes completely, shielding the wearer from something powerful, perhaps a flash of light, or a blinding presence from another realm. Secret experiments and government silence. Of course, not everyone believes in aliens, but that doesn't mean they think the official story was truthful either. A parallel theory suggests that Miguel and Manuel were involved knowingly or unknowingly in a clandestine experiment. Perhaps they were testing early psychotronic devices, or taking part in an unregulated spiritualist ritual that overlapped with military-grade substances. Brazil at the time was rife with fringe groups, underground mystics, and ex-military spiritual engineers dabbling in mind expansion and ESP research. Some suspect the men were affiliated with a secret group attempting to bridge the consciousness gap between dimensions. Others go even darker. Could they have been used as test subjects? Consider this: the complete lack of autopsy for weeks, the fast burial, the vague, inconclusive police reports. Add to that the missing evidence, like the capsules and their detailed journals, which were never made public. Even their families weren't allowed to review many of the files. For conspiracy theorists, this has all the hallmarks of a cover-up. And it begs the question, were they silenced because they got too close to the truth? The masks are a key, a less discussed but persistent theory involves the idea that the lead masks were not just for protection, but a device. Some claim that in Brazilian fringe science circles, lead visors were rumored to be used for telepathic alignment to block the noise of the material world and allow clearer reception from higher dimensions or extraterrestrial frequencies. There were whispers in 1960s Rio about a group calling themselves Os Buscadores de Luz, the Seekers of Light. They believed that certain hilltops, like Vintum Hill, were thin points between dimensions. By entering altered states and isolating their senses, contact could be made. Some think Miguel and Manolo were following this doctrine, but they either went too far or encountered something they couldn't return from. Psychological explanations? Of course, skeptics argue that all of this is fantasy, that perhaps Miguel and Manuel were simply paranoid, victims of self-induced hallucinations and misguided belief, that their actions were the result of mass suggestion or a psychological break fueled by obsession with spiritualism. But here's the problem: they weren't random eccentrics. They were electronic technicians, trained in logic and structure. They meticulously prepared their trip plan, their outfits, brought precise tools, wrote specific instructions. If this was suicide, it was unlike any suicide ever documented. And if it was ritual, then what was the end goal? Because they brought no symbols, no offerings, no religious texts, only instruments of shielding, and a sense that something was coming. Still no answers. To this day, no official theory has ever explained all the strange threads. Why the masks? Why the note? Why the absolute silence in their final moments? Whether they were seekers of truth, tools in someone else's experiment, or victims of an unknown force, Miguel and Manuel left behind a trail that has haunted investigators for generations. And for every answer proposed, two more questions appear. Maybe that's why this case refuses to die, because it touches something primal in us all. The fear that the world may be stranger than we imagine, and the unsettling possibility that we're not alone, even when we think we are. The final riddle: ritual, madness, or a glimpse beyond. As we reach the end of this bizarre and tragic mystery, one thing becomes painfully clear: there is no single version of the truth. The deaths of Miguel Nicolau Viana and Manuel Pereira da Cruz have been dissected by investigators, journalists, spiritualists, skeptics, and conspiracy theorists for over half a century. And yet, no explanation fits neatly. The rationalists' verdict: if we strip the story down to its bare essentials, some believe this is simply a case of accidental death. Two men attempting a ritual with mind-altering substances, failing to account for dosage or the effect of exposure. No trauma, no signs of violence, no wounds. Just lead masks, raincoats, and a vague set of instructions. Perhaps they truly believed they would ascend to another plane, and their deaths were the result of naive faith in pseudoscience. But would they really leave behind no explanation? No second attempt? No recorded reflection in their journals? If this was suicide, Why prepare so meticulously, only to die alone in silence? The cosmic theory. Then there's the more unsettling possibility that they succeeded, that what they saw or experienced on Victim Hill was not of this earth, that the lead masks were not tools of delusion, but a form of preparation to shield their eyes, their minds, or perhaps their very souls from something incomprehensible. An encounter that broke their physical forms, or perhaps pulled something from them we cannot see. If that's the case, the real question isn't how they died, but what they saw in those final moments. The true horror, but maybe the darkest possibility, is simpler and more human. Maybe they were just two men desperate to believe in something, in a world that offered them little meaning. Perhaps they were searching for purpose in the stars, in spiritualism, in mysticism, because the mundane explanations of life felt empty. And in their search, they went too far, trusted the wrong person, took something they didn't understand, and were left to die on a lonely hill with nothing but a pair of crude masks to mark their passage. Maybe the horror here isn't aliens or secret experiments. Maybe it's how easy it is to disappear when no one's watching. How society can write you off as crazy instead of asking deeper questions. How the thin line between genius and madness can shatter in silence. So what do you believe? Was this a failed experiment? A spiritual suicide pact? A government cover-up? Or something truly beyond our understanding? Whatever your theory, the lead masks case remains one of the most chilling and unsolved deaths in modern history. Because when you strip away the noise, all you're left with is two bodies, two lead masks, and a riddle that no one has ever solved. If this story captivated you, if you're still thinking about the masks, the capsule, or what they might have seen, then you're exactly who we make these videos for. At the Timeless File, we dive deep into history's strangest unsolved cases, forgotten truths, and chilling mysteries. Subscribe so you never miss a tale that twists deeper the more you learn. And let us know in the comments. Do you think Miguel and Nanoel were seeking spiritual ascension? Or did they stumble into something far more dangerous?